Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the show that takes dense research, the stuff you mean to read but maybe don't quite get to, and we pull out the absolute core insights for you.
Exactly, cutting through the noise.
Today we're tackling something. Well, it's complex. It's about how clothing, specifically what this study calls provocative dressing, is seen differently by men and women.
That's right. Our main source is a research article, The Power of the Visual on Men and Women's Perspective Towards Provocative Dressing. It's based on surveys and interviews with about 870 people in Quezon City in the Philippines.
So our mission here is really to understand this gap, the gap between why someone might choose to wear something, their intent, and how it's actually perceived, especially by the opposite sex.
And the potential risks and social stuff that comes with that difference.
Right. So let's unpack it. Where do we start?
Well, I think we need to start with the baseline the sources talk about, just the general psychological differences between men and women that are pretty well documented.
Okay, like what?
Things like, on average, women scoring higher on traits like extroversion, anxiety, trust, and something called tender-mindedness.
Right. And that influences how people interact, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The research notes women are often more comfortable, say, talking about vulnerabilities. They might seek closer friendships when they feel weak, building support networks.
Whereas for men, the study points towards socialization that often involves an expectation of competition, even in friendships.
Exactly. So there's this tendency to avoid showing weakness, maybe fearing it could be used against them.
And these underlying differences are key, you're saying, because they shape how visual cues, like clothing, get interpreted.
Precisely. Especially when we talk about suggestive dressing.
Okay, let's define that. What does the study mean by suggestive dressing?
It pulls from an earlier definition, basically saying it's the deliberate exposure of your body in public specifically to attract attention.
So not just wearing shorts because it's hot, but intentionally highlighting certain body parts, legs, chest, buttocks.
Right. It's about intentional visibility.
And that visibility, the study warns, can lead to sexual objectification.
Yeah, that's the second key term. It's when someone gets reduced just to their physical attributes, their body parts, essentially losing their identity as a whole person.
And the sources emphasize this happens disproportionately to women, often leading to things like self-consciousness, anxiety.
Definitely. So with that context, let's dive into the male perspective from the study, because the findings suggest the visual impact is, well, it's powerful.
Powerful how?
Physiologically powerful. The core finding is pretty stark. How women dress does affect men's behavior and their internal state, leading directly to physical arousal.
And they have numbers on this.
Oh, yeah. Big numbers. Out of the 385 men surveyed, get this, 91.16% said they get aroused seeing a woman's cleavage.
Wow, over 90%.
And 86.49% said the same about seeing a woman's legs. This isn't some small fringe reaction, it's the vast majority.
So for most men in the study, seeing exposed skin is like an immediate physical trigger.
That's what the data points to. But it doesn't stop there. It jumps to interpretation.
What do you mean?
Nearly 3/4 of these men, 74.8%, believe that women wearing revealing clothes are doing it intentionally to seduce them.
Ah, so they see the clothing and think, she's trying to send a signal, a sexual signal.
Exactly. That perception, that inferred intent, seems to be the bridge between the visual trigger and how they might think or act next.
And this connects back to the psychological profiles mentioned earlier.
It seems to. The sources describe men as naturally sex-excited, the male brain being sort of primed towards sexual conquest.
They even put a number on it, didn't they?
Yeah.
Young men thinking about sex like 19 times a day versus 10 for women.
Yeah, that statistic was cited. So if you take that biological priming, that visual response, and add the perception of intentional seduction,
then the restricted behavior starts to make a certain kind of sense, from their perspective at least.
right. Over 86% of men in relationships said they were strict or conservative about how their partners dress.
And the reason they gave is the really telling part here.
It is. Almost all of them, 96.08% of that group, said it was because they didn't want their partner to become a target, an assault target.
So they're imposing rules based on their own understanding of how that visual stimulus works and the danger they perceive out there.
Precisely. And you see a similar pattern with fathers. They surveyed 100 conservative fathers about restricting their daughter's dress.
And the reasons.
Pretty evenly split between different kinds of perceived harm. About 31% wanted to avoid negative judgment, their daughter being thought of as easy.
Okay.
Then 27% specifically mentioned avoiding maniacs, potential attackers. And another 27% felt revealing clothes reflected badly, immorality, disrespect, things like that.
So it's a mix of protecting reputation and protecting physically.
Yeah, fear of social shame and fear of actual harm.
Okay, so that's a clear picture of the male perception and reaction according to this study. Let's flip the coin. What about the women's side? What were their stated intentions for dressing this way?
Right, the other half of the equation, they asked 385 women why they might dress provocatively.
And the top reasons were?
Number one, for 76.36%, was to show off.
Okay, show off. What else?
Second, 69.35% was to attract men. And third, 55.58% was to stand out.
Interesting. To show off is number one, even higher than to attract men. That phrase show off could mean a lot of things, right? Confidence, fashion.
It could. It's broader than just attracting a partner. But attracting men is still a very strong second reason.
But how aware are women of that male perception we just discussed? The one where men often assume seduction is the intent.
That's where it gets really fascinating. The study found women are highly aware. They strongly believe wearing provocative clothes will get sexual attention.
Why? What's their reasoning?
They put it down to man's nature. They seem to accept this strong visual sexual response as just how men are wired.
And they see evidence of this.
Constantly, according to the interviews, almost all the women in relationships, 97.40%, said they'd caught their partners looking, intentionally or not, at other women in revealing clothes.
Even if the partners deny it.
Yeah, denial seems common. 89% said their partners deny it. But almost all the women, 97.66%, believe their partners do talk about it with their friends.
So there's this perceived openness about it among men, even if denied to partners.
Right. And critically, over 86% of the women interviewed agreed that this staring behavior is just man's nature.
Okay, so here's the paradox then. Women understand that revealing clothes trigger a specific, almost primal sexual response in men.
Which they accept as innate.
And they sometimes use this knowledge intentionally, say, to attract someone or stand out.
Even though they're also aware it might invite risk or unwanted attention.
That seems to be the core tension. And this awareness of risk leads us into the broader societal implications, doesn't it?
It does, because the study found a really strong consensus across both men and women.
A consensus about what?
That women dressed provocatively are perceived not just as more sexually appealing, but also potentially less faithful, and here's the crucial part, more likely to be raped compared to women in conservative clothes.
Wow. So that link between revealing clothing and perceived rape risk is deeply embedded in the thinking of both genders in this sample.
It appears so. And the study points a finger at external forces reinforcing this.
Like the media.
Exactly. Sexual objectification in films, ads, you name it. The study argues this contributes significantly to how women are objectified in real life.
Is there data on that media aspect?
Yeah, they cite figures like women being shown in sexually revealing clothing twice as often as men in films.
And does this exposure actually change behavior?
Apparently, yes. They reference research showing that men exposed to objectifying media subsequently treated female job applicants with less respect.
So it's not just background noise. It has tangible negative effect.
That's the argument. Visual input shaping real-world actions.
Okay, this is where we need to be really careful talking about clothing and assault statistics. What did the sources say here?
Right, it's complex. The study acknowledges that some research indicates a majority of rape victims were wearing provocative clothing at the time.
But, and there's a huge but.
A huge but. A significant number of victims were not dressed provocatively. So clothing is clearly not the single deciding factor. It cannot be the sole cause.
And what about who the perpetrators are? Does that fit the idea that provocative clothing attracts dangerous strangers?
Not really. When you look at the numbers cited, the vast majority of offenders were known to the victim. Something like 45% were partners or ex-partners.
45%.
And another 38% were other acquaintances, friends, colleagues, neighbors. Which leaves only about 18% as complete strangers.
It completely changes the narrative, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If most assaults happen with known individuals, focusing only on clothing as a trigger for stranger attacks misses a huge part of the picture.
It really does. And the study concludes from this that, look, telling women how to dress isn't going to solve rape. The causes are much deeper, often tied to relationships and societal issues.
But they do still suggest regulating dress has a role.
Yes, they conclude it could minimize incidents and lower the overall risk, specifically by reducing that strong visual trigger in public interactions. It's presented as a risk mitigation strategy, not a solution to the root cause.
So we come back to that central conflict. Women wanting to express themselves, show off, attract.
While being fully aware of what they believe is man's nature in response and the risks that entails.
The researchers used an analogy, didn't they?
They did, a pretty provocative one. They asked, essentially, why jump into a swamp full of crocodiles if you don't want to be killed? Unless perhaps you want to prove something.
Implying that choosing to dress that way, knowing the perceived danger, suggests an acceptance of that risk to achieve a desired outcome.
That seems to be the author's interpretation, that the act itself signals awareness and maybe even a degree of acceptance of the risk tied to eliciting that specific visual response.
So, wrapping the main findings together, it boils down to men have a strong physiological visual response.
Women are aware of this, accept it as man's nature, and sometimes use it intentionally for attraction.
While also knowing it increases perceived risks, like objectification and assault potential.
That's the core synthesis, yes.
And based on all that, what did the study actually recommend?
Well, given their focus on the power of the visual and perceived risk, their recommendations were quite direct. They proposed a decency law to regulate public dress.
A decency law.
Wow, and also measures to stop films and ads that rely on sexual objectification, basically controlling the visual inputs they see as problematic.
Regulating both personal dress and media portrayals. That's quite a stance.
It is. It flows directly from their finding that the visual element is so powerful and its interpretation so potentially dangerous.
It certainly paints a picture of biology, intention, perception, and risk all tangled up together.
Definitely a complex web.
Which leaves us, and you, the listener, with a final thought to chew on. If we take the study's findings at face value, that men have this inherent visual response, and women know it and sometimes use it despite the risks, where should the effort for change really focus? Is it about regulating the visuals, like the study suggests with dress codes and media control? Or is the deeper work in dismantling the belief system, held by both men and women in this study, that somehow links clothing choice directly to the legitimacy or likelihood of assault? Where does the responsibility truly lie?